Zektar had conquered 17 star systems before he learned what terror truly meant. The Vorthak Empire stretched across half the galaxy, and he had been its greatest weapon. His 4 arms could crush steel, his exoskeleton could deflect plasma bolts, and his tactical mind had never met defeat. Until the humans came. The briefing chamber aboard the flagship Devastator buzzed with confidence that day. Admiral Kethros, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction, displayed the holographic image of a small blue world in the Outer Rim territories. Earth, he announced to the assembled War Council. 3rd planet from a yellow dwarf star. The inhabitants call themselves humans. Our scouts report they have barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Primitive chemical propulsion for atmospheric flight, no energy shields, no plasma weaponry. Zektar studied the data streams flowing across his neural interface. The humans had only recently made contact with other species. Their military consisted of kinetic weapons, explosive devices, and crude projectile launchers. Their ships were metal hulks held together by bolts and welds rather than elegant energy matrices. "How many worlds do they control?" asked Commander Ythal, her serpentine head swaying with curiosity. "1," Kethros replied, and laughter rippled through the chamber. "A single world. They have not even colonized their own solar system properly. A few research stations, mining operations on dead rocks, nothing more." Zektar felt a familiar stirring in his combat glands. Another easy conquest. Another species to be absorbed into the Empire or eliminated if they proved troublesome. The humans would likely surrender after the first orbital bombardment demonstration. Most primitive species did. Their population, Zektar inquired, more out of habit than concern. 8 billion, concentrated primarily on the planetary surface. No orbital habitats of significance. No defensive platforms. Their largest weapons appear to be crude fusion devices that require physical delivery systems. The intelligence officer, a thin Cytherian with multifaceted eyes, activated additional displays. Their biology is carbon-based, requiring specific atmospheric conditions. Average height 1.8 meters, mass 70 kilograms. Single heart, single brain, no redundant organ systems, extremely fragile by our standards. More laughter. Zektar had faced species like this before. Soft-bodied creatures that relied on technology rather than natural weapons. They usually broke quickly when faced with superior force. "Estimated resistance duration?" asked Admiral Kethros. "Minimal. Perhaps 1 standard cycle if they attempt organized defense. More likely, immediate surrender upon demonstration of our capabilities." Zektar's combat implants were already calculating deployment strategies. A simple orbital blockade would suffice. Cut off their communication networks, destroy their military installations, demand surrender. Standard protocol for primitive worlds. The War Council dispersed with casual efficiency. This would be a minor operation, hardly worthy of the Empire's greatest warrior. Zektar had hoped for more challenging prey. The Andromedans had put up fierce resistance for 3 years. The crystal entities of Vega had required innovative tactics to defeat. But humans? This would be over before it properly began. 3 cycles later, the Vorthak First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 200 warships, each the size of a small city, bristling with energy weapons capable of cracking planets. Zektar commanded the assault vessel Predator's Edge, a kilometer-long dreadnought designed for close-quarters combat. "Human vessels approaching," reported his sensor operator, a nervous Zephyrian whose translator struggled with excitement. "Multiple contacts. They appear to be primitive." On the main display, Zektar watched the human fleet emerge from behind their moon. Crude metal ships with visible exhaust trails and communication arrays that broadcast in primitive electromagnetic spectra. No energy shields shimmered around their hulls, no weapons charged with telltale plasma signatures. "How many ships?" Zektar asked. 47 vessels of varying configurations. Largest appears to be 800 meters in length. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Translation? The communications officer, her tentacles dancing across control surfaces, nodded. They request communication with our commanding officer. They wish to negotiate. Zektar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Of course they wanted to negotiate. All primitive species tried diplomacy first. It never worked, but they always tried. "Open a channel," he commanded. The main screen flickered, and suddenly he was looking at a human face. Pale skin, small eyes, no natural armor or weapons visible. The creature wore what appeared to be a uniform of some kind, covered in colorful patches and metal ornaments. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. Its voice was higher-pitched than Zektar expected, almost musical. "You have entered our solar system with what appears to be a hostile fleet. State your intentions." Zektar activated his own communication array. When he spoke, his words were translated into the crude human language automatically. "I am War Commander Zektar of the Vorthak Empire. Your species has been selected for incorporation into our domain. Surrender immediately, and your people will be permitted to serve the Empire. Resist, and you will be eliminated." The human's face showed no fear. Instead, something flickered in its small eyes that Zektar couldn't identify. Later, he would learn to recognize that expression. It was the look humans wore when someone had just made a terrible mistake. "Admiral," another human voice spoke off-screen. "The alien fleet is maintaining position at the system's edge. No immediate aggressive action." Admiral Chen nodded without breaking eye contact with Zektar. "War Commander, I'm going to make this very simple for you. Turn around and leave our system, now. This is your only warning." The audacity struck Zektar speechless for a moment. 47 primitive ships threatening 200 advanced warships? The human was either insane or incredibly brave. Neither mattered. "You have 1 standard hour to surrender," Zektar replied. "After that, we will begin orbital bombardment of your world. Your species will serve or die. Choose wisely." He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Begin deployment. Standard formation Delta 7. Target their planetary communication networks first, then military installations. Minimal civilian casualties until surrender." "Acknowledged, War Commander. Fleet reports ready for engagement." Zektar settled into his command throne, watching the tactical displays update as his fleet moved into attack formation. The human ships had spread into what appeared to be a defensive line, though what they hoped to accomplish with such primitive vessels was beyond his comprehension. The first phase would be a demonstration. Destroy a few military targets, show the humans the futility of resistance, accept their inevitable surrender. He had performed this same dance dozens of times across the galaxy. His sensor operator's voice interrupted his planning. "War Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the human vessels." "Specify." "Unknown. The readings are inconsistent with their technological profile. Some kind of new energy source, perhaps?" Zektar frowned. Intelligence had been thorough in their assessment. Humans used primitive fusion reactors and chemical propulsion, nothing that should register as unknown on Vorthak sensors. "Maintain surveillance, probably just their crude power systems operating at maximum capacity." "Yes, War Commander." The hour passed slowly. Zektar used the time to study the human fleet formation. It was actually quite clever for a primitive species. They had positioned their larger vessels to protect smaller ones, created overlapping fields of fire, even established what appeared to be communication relays to maintain coordination if individual ships were disabled. Professional admiration flickered in his mind. These humans might actually provide a few minutes of interesting combat before inevitably falling. "Time limit expired, War Commander. reported his chronometer officer. "Begin attack. Target the largest human vessel first. Single plasma volley to disable. We want survivors for interrogation." The Predator's Edge rotated slowly, bringing its primary weapons array to bear on the human flagship. Zektar watched the targeting displays lock onto the enemy vessel, calculating the precise power levels needed to cripple without destroying. "Firing," announced his weapons officer. The plasma bolt streaked across space, a lance of superheated energy capable of melting through a mountain. It struck the human ship exactly where intended, and Zektar waited for the satisfying explosion as their primitive hull breached. Instead, the energy simply stopped. A shimmering barrier had materialized around the human vessel, absorbing the plasma bolt completely. The ship continued on its course, apparently undamaged. "What?" Zektar surged to his feet, all four arms gripping his command throne. "That's impossible. They don't have shield technology." "Confirmed hit, War Commander. No damage detected to target vessel." "Fire again. Full power." This time, 3 plasma bolts struck the human ship simultaneously. The barriers around it flared brighter, but held firm. And now, impossibly, the human fleet was accelerating. "War Commander!" His sensor operator's voice carried a note of panic. "The human vessels are moving at... This can't be correct. They're accelerating beyond physically possible parameters for their design specifications." On the tactical display, Zektar watched the human fleet surge forward like a pack of predators. Their acceleration curves defied everything he knew about physics. Ships that should barely be capable of interplanetary travel were moving like advanced interceptors. "Evasive maneuvers," he commanded. "All ships, defensive formation." But even as his fleet began to respond, Zektar realized something that sent ice through his veins. The humans weren't just moving fast. They were moving with purpose. Their formation wasn't the chaotic charge of desperate primitives. It was a carefully coordinated attack run. The first human ship reached weapons range and opened fire. Zektar expected projectile weapons, perhaps crude energy beams. Instead, lances of coherent antimatter tore through space, striking his escort vessels with pinpoint accuracy. Where they hit, Vorthak armor simply ceased to exist. "Impossible," he whispered. Antimatter weapons required technology levels far beyond what intelligence had reported. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for ships of that size. More human vessels joined the attack. Each one revealed new impossibilities. Gravity weapons that crushed his ships like empty shells. Energy beams that phased through shields as if they weren't there. Projectiles that somehow curved around defensive fire to strike with mathematical precision. "War Commander!" his communications officer screamed over the sound of alarms. "The human admiral is requesting another communication." "On screen!" Admiral Chen's face appeared again, but now Zektar could see the bridge behind her. It was nothing like the primitive command center he had expected. Holographic displays showed tactical information in 3 dimensions. Officers worked at control stations that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. Everything hummed with quiet, deadly efficiency. "War Commander Zektar," Chen said calmly, as if her ships weren't currently destroying his fleet. "I tried to warn you. Humans don't like bullies." "Your technology," Zektar managed. "Intelligence reports said you were primitive. Chemical rockets, kinetic weapons." Chen smiled. And Zektar finally understood the expression he had seen earlier. It was predatory satisfaction. "We are primitive," she agreed. "We've only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years. We've only been in space for a century or so. We're babies compared to species like yours." Another of his ships exploded on the tactical display. "But you see, War Commander, humans have a very specific talent. We're extremely good at learning from our mistakes, and we're even better at learning from other people's technology." The truth hit Zektar like a physical blow. "The other species, the ones you made contact with." Every race that has visited our system has been very generous with their knowledge. Trade agreements, technology exchanges, cultural sharing. We're fast learners and we make excellent friends. Admiral Chen's smile widened. We also make terrible enemies. Zektar's world had turned into a nightmare of impossible physics and shattered assumptions. Half his fleet was gone, reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and metal fragments. The humans had revealed technology that shouldn't exist, wielding weapons that violated every tactical doctrine he had ever learned. "Retreat!" he commanded, his voice cracking with desperation he had never felt before. "All ships! Emergency hyperspace jump!" But even as his surviving vessels began charging their jump drives, the human fleet moved to intercept. Their ships flowed through space like living things, adapting to every defensive maneuver with casual efficiency. "Jump drives are being disrupted, War Commander," his engineering officer reported. "The humans are generating some kind of interdiction field. We cannot enter hyperspace." Zektar stared at the tactical display in horror. Hyperspace interdiction required massive orbital installations or specialized vessels the size of space stations. The human ships were generating the effect from vessels barely a tenth the size of his own dreadnought. "Impossible," he whispered for the third time in as many minutes. Admiral Chen's voice echoed through his bridge speakers. Somehow the humans had maintained their communication link despite the chaos of battle. "War Commander, your fleet is trapped. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Your ships cannot escape. I'm offering you one last chance to surrender." "Vorthak warriors do not surrender," Zektar roared, his combat glands flooding his system with stimulants. "We fight until death." "I was hoping you would say that." The communication cut off, and suddenly the human fleet changed tactics entirely. Instead of maintaining distance and using their superior weapons, the ships began closing for what could only be boarding actions. Zektar's tactical officer, a veteran of 50 campaigns, turned to him with wide, frightened eyes. "War Commander, they're moving to board us. Should we prepare repel boarders?" The question should have been laughable. Humans were fragile creatures with no natural weapons. Even if they somehow managed to breach his ship's hull, his crew of hardened Vorthak warriors would tear them apart in hand-to-hand combat. "Deploy boarding defenses," he ordered. "All crew to combat stations. Show these soft-skinned primitives what happens when they face true warriors." The first human ship attached itself to the Predator's edge with a resonant clang that reverberated through the hull. Zektar felt the familiar excitement of close combat surging through his system. This, at least, was familiar territory. His internal communications crackled to life. "Breach in Section 7. They're cutting through the hull." "How many?" Zektar demanded. "Unknown, War Commander. The cutting beam is unlike anything we've seen. It's slicing through our armor like paper." Zektar grabbed his personal weapons and activated his combat armor. The powered exoskeleton doubled his already formidable strength and provided additional protection against energy weapons. Around him, his bridge crew was doing the same. "Security teams to Section 7, he commanded. "I want these humans captured alive for interrogation." But as he made his way through the corridors of his ship, the reports coming through his communication system grew increasingly disturbing. "Security Team Alpha is not responding. Breach in Section 12. They're moving through the ventilation systems. Medical emergency in the armory. Multiple casualties." Zektar reached Section 7 to find a scene of devastation. The human boarding craft had burned through 3 meters of hardened armor plating in minutes. The breach itself was a perfect circle, edges still glowing from whatever cutting tool they had used. Bodies of his crew littered the corridor. Vorthak warriors, each one capable of defeating a dozen ordinary soldiers, lay motionless. Their armor was intact, showing no signs of energy weapon burns or projectile impacts. "What killed them?" he asked the surviving security officer, whose mandibles were clicking with terror. "Unknown, War Commander. They just fell. The humans touched them and they collapsed." Zektar knelt beside one of the bodies, activating his armor's medical scanners. The results made no sense. Neural activity had simply ceased. No toxins detected, no trauma, no indication of what had caused death. A sound echoed through the corridor behind him. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too light for Vorthak warriors, too rhythmic for panic. Measured, confident steps approaching with mechanical precision. He turned, raising his plasma rifle, and got his first close look at human soldiers in combat gear. They were smaller than he had expected, but there was something deeply unsettling about their appearance. Their armor was matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their helmets showed no faces, only smooth surfaces that reflected his own terrified expression back at him. But it was their movements that sent primal fear racing through his nervous system. They flowed through the corridor like liquid death, each step perfectly coordinated with the others. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no emotional responses visible. "Halt!" Zektar commanded, his translator broadcasting in human language. "Surrender immediately!" The humans stopped. One of them tilted its head slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed amusement, despite the lack of visible features. Then they moved. Zektar had been a warrior for over 2 centuries. He had fought in zero gravity, underwater, in the crushing gravity of gas-giant moons. His reflexes were enhanced by military-grade neural implants, his reactions measured in microseconds. The humans moved faster. His plasma rifle discharged once before they reached him. The bolt struck the lead human center mass and simply dissipated against its armor. Then armored hands were on him, and impossible strength was tearing his weapon away. He swung with all 4 arms, combat claws extended, strikes that could shatter stone. The human caught 2 of his arms casually, twisted slightly, and Zektar heard the enhanced bones in his wrists snap like twigs. Pain flooded his system, but training took over. He activated his armor's emergency systems, flooding his bloodstream with combat stimulants and analgesics. His backup weapons deployed automatically, energy blades extending from his remaining functional arms. The human released him and stepped back, and Zektar realized it had been toying with him, testing his capabilities, studying his responses. "What are you?" he gasped in his own language. The human's helmet tilted again. When it spoke, the words came from its armor's speaker system in perfect Vorthak. "We are what your species made us become." Before Zektar could process that statement, the human moved again. This time there was no restraint. Enhanced reflexes that had saved his life countless times proved useless. The human's movements were a blur of controlled violence that ended with Zektar on the deck, his remaining functional arms pinned behind his back. "Impossible," he whispered, the word that had become his constant refrain. "No biological entity can move that fast. Those reactions require cybernetic enhancement beyond any known technology." The human leaned closer, and Zektar could hear the quiet hum of machinery from within its armor. "Correct. We are no longer entirely biological." The implications hit him like a physical blow. "You modified yourselves, cybernetic implants, neural enhancement." "Much more than that." The human's voice carried no emotion, no pride or shame at what it had become. "When we learned that the galaxy was full of species like yours, we realized that human biology was insufficient for survival." Restraints materialized around Zektar's limbs, some kind of energy binding that his enhanced strength couldn't break. The human stood, regarding him with mechanical precision. "We studied every species that visited our system. We learned about their capabilities, their weaknesses, their technologies, and we improved ourselves." More humans appeared in the corridor, moving with the same fluid precision. They were herding the surviving members of his crew like livestock, and Zektar realized that the battle for his ship was over. "Your species is particularly interesting," the human continued conversationally. "Enhanced strength, redundant organ systems, natural armor plating. We incorporated all of those traits into our upgrades." Zektar's mind reeled. "You cannot simply add biological enhancements from other species. Genetic incompatibility would kill you." It did. The first 1,000 volunteers died during the enhancement process. The next 1,000 lasted longer but eventually succumbed to rejection syndromes. By the 5th generation, we had solved the compatibility issues. The casual way the human discussed the deaths of its own kind sent new chills through Zektar's system. What kind of species willingly sacrificed thousands of their own people for military advancement? "Of course," the human added. "We didn't stop with biological enhancement. We also incorporated technological improvements, neural interfaces, processing augmentation, reaction time acceleration. Each generation of enhanced humans became faster, stronger, more capable than the last." They were moving through the ship now, Zektar being carried along by restraints he couldn't see but couldn't break. The corridors were filled with human soldiers methodically securing every section. His crew offered no resistance. How could they? Everything they had believed about combat superiority had been shattered. "How many?" Zektar asked weakly. "Enhanced soldiers? This ship carries 200. The fleet has approximately 10,000. But that's not the frightening part, War Commander." The human stopped at a viewing port that showed the space battle still raging outside. Zektar could see his remaining ships being systematically disabled or destroyed. "The frightening part is that these enhanced soldiers represent less than 1% of our military capability. They are our boarding specialists, designed for ship-to-ship combat. We have other variants for different types of warfare." Through the viewport, Zektar watched one of his escort cruisers explode in brilliant silence. The human fleet moved through his forces like surgical instruments, each ship destroyed with mathematical precision. Environmental warfare specialists for hostile planet operations, deep space variants for zero-gravity combat, heavy assault units for fortified position attacks. Each one represents a different approach to the same problem. "What problem?" Zektar whispered. The human turned to look at him directly, and even through the featureless helmet, Zektar felt the weight of its attention. "How to ensure that humanity never faces extinction at the hands of species like yours." They reached what had been his own command bridge. Human technicians were already interfacing with his computer systems, downloading tactical databases and fleet communications. The efficiency was terrifying. They moved like a collective organism, each individual perfectly coordinated with the others. "You want to know the truly frightening part about humans, War Commander?" The enhanced soldier gestured toward the tactical displays, which now showed the complete destruction of his fleet. 200 Vorthak warships reduced to debris in less than 4 hours. "We learned all of this from watching other species make war. Your tactics, your technologies, your strategic doctrines. We absorbed everything and made it better." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, transmitted from her flagship. She looked exactly as she had at the beginning of the battle, calm and professional. "War Commander Zektar," she said formally, "your fleet has been destroyed. Your surviving crew members are being processed as prisoners of war. You have a choice to make." Zektar found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "What choice?" "Return to your empire. Tell them what happened here. Explain that humanity is under the protection of the Galactic Defense Alliance, and any further aggressive actions will be met with overwhelming force." The enhanced soldier beside him spoke quietly. "The alternative is that we demonstrate our capabilities by visiting your home worlds directly." For the first time in his long military career, Zektar understood true fear. Not the adrenaline surge of combat, not the worry about tactical failure, but the deep existential terror of facing something so far beyond his understanding that resistance was meaningless. "How?" he asked. "How did you accomplish this in so little time?" Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, showing something almost like sympathy. "War, Commander? Humans have been killing each other for our entire evolutionary history. We are very, very good at warfare. When we learned that we were not alone in the galaxy, we simply applied that expertise on a larger scale." The transmission ended, leaving Zektar alone with the enhanced soldier and the wreckage of everything he thought he knew about military superiority. 6 months later, Zektar stood before the Vorthak High Council, his words echoing in the vast chamber carved from living stone. The greatest military minds of the Empire listened in stunned silence as he delivered his report. "The human defensive fleet numbered less than 50 vessels," he concluded. "Our force was superior by a factor of 4 to 1. We possessed overwhelming technological and numerical advantages. The engagement lasted 3 hours and 47 minutes. Total Vorthak casualties: 193 ships destroyed, 47,000 dead, 12,000 captured." Counselor Thekvar, his ancient mandibles scarred from a dozen wars, leaned forward on his throne. "And human casualties?" None reported. The silence that followed was deafening. Zektar had delivered this same briefing to 7 different military commands, and the reaction was always the same. Disbelief, followed by anger, followed by the slow, creeping realization that the Vorthak Empire had encountered something unprecedented. "Impossible," Thekvar hissed. "No engagement between equivalent forces results in 0 casualties for the victor. You are concealing failures in your tactical assessment." 6 months ago, Zektar would have bristled at such an accusation. Now, he simply felt tired. The enhanced human had released him exactly as promised, providing a small scout ship and navigation data to return to Empire space. The journey had given him time to process what he had experienced, and the conclusions were terrifying. "I have provided complete tactical recordings," he said quietly. "The human vessels demonstrated technologies beyond our current understanding. Their soldiers showed capabilities that suggest extensive biological and cybernetic enhancement. Their tactical coordination implied shared consciousness or near-instantaneous communication systems. General Kothran, commander of the Second Fleet, activated his personal display. These recordings show energy weapon impacts that simply vanish against their hull plating. Impossible deflection angles that violate basic physics. And these soldiers..." The holographic playback showed the corridor fight in horrible detail. Zektar watched himself, the Empire's greatest warrior, being systematically dismantled by a single human in less than 30 seconds. "Cybernetic enhancement," Kothran muttered. "But the level of integration required would kill any biological organism. The neural interface alone would cause massive brain damage. Unless," Zektar said slowly, "they were willing to accept massive casualties during the development process. The human admitted that thousands died during early enhancement attempts." The council chamber erupted in shocked chatter. The idea of deliberately sacrificing large numbers of individuals for military advancement was alien to Vorthak thinking. Their society valued warrior excellence, but the concept of treating soldiers as expendable test subjects was horrifying. Counselor Yethal, her serpentine form coiled in agitation, spoke over the noise. "No species would willingly accept such losses. You must have misunderstood their communication." "I did not." Zektar activated his own recording system, playing back the enhanced soldier's words. "They spoke of 5 generations of volunteers, each improving on the previous iteration. They treated the deaths as acceptable costs for achieving their objectives." High Counselor Vexmoth, eldest of the ruling body, raised one massive claw for silence. "War Commander, You are suggesting that this species deliberately bred superior soldiers through trial and error, accepting massive mortality rates in pursuit of military advancement. That is exactly what I am suggesting, High Counselor. Moreover, they indicated that their enhanced soldiers represent only a small fraction of their total military capability. General Kothran manipulated his tactical display, showing the recorded engagement from multiple angles. These ships demonstrate acceleration profiles impossible for their apparent mass. Either they have mastered gravity manipulation far beyond our capabilities, or what, General? Or their ships are not what they appear to be. The hulls, the engines, the apparent technological level could all be deliberate deceptions. Zektar nodded grimly. Admiral Chen admitted that humans are excellent at learning from other species. Every race that has made contact with Earth has shared technology and knowledge. They have had decades to study and improve upon galactic standard designs. But why maintain the appearance of primitive technology? Tekvar demanded. Because it makes species like ours underestimate them. We dismissed them as primitives and attacked with insufficient force. Had we known their true capabilities, we would have brought the entire First Fleet. High Counselor Vexmoth stood slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. War Commander, what is your assessment of human military capability? The question Zektar had been dreading. He had spent months analyzing every aspect of the engagement, comparing human demonstrations against known galactic military standards. The conclusions were disturbing. High Counselor, based on observed performance, I believe human military capability exceeds that of any known species. Their technology appears to be hybrid designs incorporating the best elements from multiple galactic civilizations. Their soldiers demonstrate enhancement levels that suggest they have solved biological engineering problems that have challenged scientists for millennia. You believe they could threaten the Empire? Zektar thought carefully before responding. The truth was almost too terrible to speak aloud. High Counselor, I believe they could destroy the Empire, not threaten, destroy, completely. The chamber erupted in outrage. Voices rose in anger and disbelief, challenging his assessment and his competence. But Zektar had seen human capabilities firsthand. He had watched inferior numbers defeat superior forces through technology and tactics that bordered on supernatural. Silence! Vexmoth's roar echoed through the chamber. Explain your assessment, War Commander. Their single defensive fleet disabled 200 of our finest warships in under 4 hours. They demonstrated weapons technology decades ahead of our own designs. Their soldiers are enhanced beyond anything we believed possible. And according to their own statements, this represents a minor portion of their total capability. Zektar activated additional displays, showing intelligence reports gathered from across the galaxy. Since the engagement, our agents have made discreet inquiries about human activities. What we have learned is disturbing. They have established defense pacts with over 40 species. They have provided military training and technology to smaller civilizations. Their merchant vessels travel freely throughout the galaxy, but detailed scans reveal defensive systems more advanced than our military ships. General Kothran studied the data streams with growing alarm. These energy signatures, some of these merchant vessels are more heavily armed than our battle cruisers. Every human ship, military or civilian, incorporates defensive systems designed to deal with threats like our fleet. They have prepared for galactic warfare on a scale that suggests they expect conflict. Counselor Yethal uncoiled nervously. Why would they expect conflict if they are so peaceful? Because, Counselor, they have studied galactic history. They have learned about species like ours. They know that eventually, someone would attempt to conquer or destroy them. Zektar manipulated his displays to show a galactic map with human influence marked in blue. The spread was extensive, covering nearly a third of known space. They have spent 50 years building alliances, sharing technology, and preparing defenses. Every species they have contacted has been offered protection in exchange for knowledge and cooperation. They are not just defending Earth, they are defending half the galaxy. The implications settled over the Council like a suffocating blanket. The Vorthak Empire had built its power through conquest and intimidation. Now they faced an opponent who had built power through cooperation and mutual defense. "What do you recommend, War Commander?" Vexmoth asked quietly. The question Zektar had hoped to avoid. Military doctrine was clear. When facing a superior opponent, either find a weakness to exploit or avoid engagement entirely. But humans had demonstrated no obvious weaknesses, and their influence was too widespread to avoid. "High Counselor, I recommend immediate diplomatic contact with human authorities. We should seek to establish peaceful relations and avoid any actions that could be construed as aggressive." The chamber erupted again, but this time with outrage rather than disbelief. The idea of the mighty Vorthak Empire seeking peace with a species they had intended to conquer was almost unthinkable. "You suggest we surrender without fighting?" Thekvar snarled. "I suggest we survive," Zektar replied calmly. "High Counselor, I have faced human military capabilities directly. Fighting them would result in the complete destruction of our civilization. They have superior technology, superior tactics, and superior strategic position." "You speak of them as if they were gods," General Kothron protested. "No, General, gods might show mercy. Humans showed me exactly what they are capable of and then released me to deliver this message. They want us to know what we would face if we chose to continue aggression." Zektar turned to address the full council, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Counselors, I have commanded fleets across 17 star systems. I have defeated enemies that outnumbered us 10 to 1. I have never retreated from any engagement, never admitted defeat, never known fear." He paused, letting that sink in. "The humans taught me what fear truly means. Not fear of death in combat, but fear of absolute helplessness against an opponent so superior that resistance is meaningless. They could have killed every member of my crew. Instead, they demonstrated their capabilities and sent me home to deliver a warning." "What warning?" Vexmoth asked. "That humanity is no longer the primitive species we thought we could easily conquer. They have become something else entirely. Something designed specifically to defend against threats like the Vorthak Empire." Zektar called up one final display, showing the recorded image of Admiral Chen from their final communication. "She told me that humans don't like bullies. I believe this was not just a statement about their preferences, but a declaration of purpose. They have made themselves into the galaxy's response to predatory civilizations." The chamber fell silent as the full implications became clear. The Vorthak Empire had built its power by preying on weaker species. Now they faced an opponent specifically designed to stop species like them. "High Counselor," Zektar concluded, "we have two choices. We can attempt to fight the humans and face certain destruction, or we can acknowledge that the age of conquest is over and find new ways to survive in a galaxy where bullies are no longer tolerated." High Counselor Vexmoth regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "War Commander Zekatar, you are hereby appointed as our first ambassador to the Human Defense Alliance. Your mission is to establish diplomatic relations and negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence." As Zektar accepted the assignment that would define the rest of his life, he reflected on the strange irony of his situation. He had begun this encounter as the Empire's greatest weapon of conquest. Now he would become its instrument of survival. The humans had taught him many things about fear, but perhaps more importantly, they had taught him something about respect and hope. Because if a species could transform themselves so completely in response to galactic threats, perhaps other species could learn to transform as well. Perhaps even the mighty Vorthak Empire could evolve beyond its predatory nature. After all, humans had once been primitive creatures fighting with crude weapons on a single world. Now they protected half the galaxy. Evolution, Zektar realized, was not just possible. In the face of human capabilities, it had become necessary for survival. The age of conquest was indeed over. The age of cooperation was about to begin.